Hello and welcome to a 21st Century Film Club. In this episode, we're talking about Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans. What did you think of the film?
I absolutely love this film, Stephen. When I first saw the promo for it, it's been loads of buses in Manchester, it's really been everywhere. I thought it looked a bit dry, a bit dull, a bit boring. I had no idea actually that it would just be really a heartwarming family tale spanning several years in Steven Spielberg's own life. I didn't realise at all that it was autobiographical in nature, and I also just felt like the acting in this film was exquisite, and to hear that it's been nominated it's his 13th ever Best Picture nomination. To me, I do think it's actually deserved.
Yeah.
I think Steven Spielberg, it's a bit like Christmas, it's a bit like your family. In childhood you may like him, and then as a teenager you grow out of love with him, but now that I'm more of an adult, I think these type of films appeal to me again. But I could definitely see if you're a moody teenager, the film might go over your head.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was just, for me, it probably, like, I can see why it's been, like, up there for best films, like, every award, like, possible. The acting was brilliant, the story was brilliant, it was personal, it was, like, emotional. It pulled on, like, my heartstrings a lot. Like I said, I kept seeing it advertised, and I tried to stay away from, like, watching trailers, but over the 240 minutes it didn't feel like that. It was just so good, and yeah, it told the story really well of Spielberg's life.
Yeah. For a film that was 2.5 hours, I thought it was actually the right time, and I rarely say that for a film of that length.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why it worked was because it was structured quite equally into the different locations the family moved into, which was quite realistic.
Yeah.
So it started out in New Jersey, then it went to Arizona, and then eventually it was in California.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought actually that California was probably the weakest section of the whole film, because I think to me that's when there was less of a story going on, because basically the film was about his relationship with his mother primarily, and then in the final part it became about like high school and growing up in a lot of cliches and conventions. But what did you think about the final?
I think it needed to have that transition from family to the high school situation, because that clearly impacts Spielberg in his life, and that's why he wanted to show that. I think clearly him being bullied at the new school, the anti-Semitism he suffered at the hands of bullies clearly played a huge role in his life, or at that time in his life. I do think it really does turn into like a high school drama at some points, but I think it just about gets away with it. But I agree with you. I think the first act in New Jersey and then the second act in Arizona, I think those are the strongest parts. I don't think the third part is weak. I just think it's a different story than the first two acts. But again, it's just I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's like a different vibe. Even though it was in Arizona, it's really the last part where you kind of get into the 1960s vibes of things, and also the sunshine and the sunny Cali weather. And the rest of the film it was a depressing film in many ways. I think the depiction of mental illness and suffering, really, it wasn't really about mental illness, it was just emotional suffering. But I kept waiting for the film to really go deep into some diagnosis or some hospital story, so then for it to kind of end with this taboo of divorce and a mother leaving her children, which for even today is so highly controversial for a mother to leave. To me, that was almost more of an interesting film than I thought it would be.
I think that probably speaks to the time. It was set in like 1960s, 1950s. I think the depression and mental health side of it, I think they would have probably struggled to talk about that kind of thing back in the time. I'm not an expert, but I guess mental health was not something that was spoken about, especially the father, played by Paul Dano.
Yes.
He came from the army, or spent time in the army.
World War II.
And I guess it's not really, he didn't really say it, but I guess he wants to push that strong, the traditional family roles, like the father goes to work, does the like
Yeah.
he's the breadwinner, and then the mother stays at home, looks after the kids, and just plays her role. And I guess the mother, played brilliantly by Michelle Williams, is just, she doesn't want to play that role. She wants to have her own freedoms, and her being forced to play the mother, play the housewife, is obviously just affects her mental health. And then later on, the divorce situation is really interesting, because it's clear to see that dynamic isn't working. The mother-father situation. The mother is like in a relationship with his best friend or employee, and yeah, it's just really interesting how that played out. And yeah, it's unusual to see the mother like one initiation, like pushing that idea of divorce and wanting like a breakaway.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It is very much a product of the World War II, the whole family, their experiences, them moving up the world in the social ladder. And as you say, it's a film also really about materialism. There's a beautiful shot at the end of the film where in this gorgeous kind of new 1960s modern house.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be like this Kodak happy, that's a Mad Men reference, a happy kind of family moment. And then you see in Michelle Williams' eyes that it's over, really, and that something inside her has died, or at least when she's still with her husband. And for me, I think that kind of said a lot about the World War II era, that they were, as a family in general, they were kind of happier with less. They were happier with the father, with their community. And for any family in any country to get ahead, especially as an immigrant family, you have to kind of move around the country, and then you kind of lose relatives, you lose friends, and eventually until you're kind of in this artificial landscape, which really LA epitomizes, doesn't it? And then you kind of just lose that part of yourself. And I think Steven Spielberg's himself in that film, he lost his love of filmmaking and art. So that was another very good link to the film, and a family of creatives, the mother behind a play, and it was
I thought the mother side of it, I think every time, I read something that the mother, Spielberg's mother was like that. She was very ditzy and very enthusiastic and very strange, and I think she's played very well, and just her role in general. I think the first two acts, the film is sort of about her more than Spielberg or Sammy in the film, and it's about sort of the mother-son relationship, kind of, and because you don't really see the father that much. Like he's there, but he's not really around, which I guess is how it was for him growing up. That's a really interesting dynamic, and you see a lot of Seth Rogen's character, is it Benny?
Uncle Benny.
Uncle Benny, a lot, and obviously it's clear why.
That was a real climax of the film, when through the medium of film he was able to discover about his mum's kind of very tame affair almost, and I think she even admitted in the film they haven't even slept with each other or alluded to that properly. So but really in an emotional affair is just as bad as a physical affair, and it really did tear the family apart. And I think for him to find out through film this betrayal, it did spark like a crisis in him. And why is he doing this?
It's a real
why is he an
heartbreak
observer?
moment. Yeah, it's a real heartbreak moment, him having to like do the thing he loves, like which is filmmaking, or especially at such a young age. He's like what, 12, 13, 14 at the time when he discovers this. And yeah, you really feel his pain and anguish. Like he can't really reveal it to anyone. His sisters are younger than him. You really feel like he's the one. Sammy's the one to try and keep this family together, and obviously that takes its toll on him. And that mother-son relationship sort of breaks down in a way, somewhat abusively as well at one point.
Yeah, and I was very intrigued about the abuse in this film, because on one hand, it is so awful to hit your child in any circumstance. But really, I think by the end of the film, it did suggest that if the worst thing that ever happened to him with his mother was that type of argument before his swimming test, and it did leave a physical mark, but if that was his height of abuse, then in a way he was almost victimizing himself, or his mother was victimizing himself, when really... Did you think he had a happy childhood?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's questionable. It's questionable. Like, we don't really know what happened other than this snapshot in the film. I would say, yeah, like, he got to do filmmaking, which seems fun. He got to move around, which I guess can take its toll on young children. But it seemed like he had quite a happy childhood. Just the toll of having to keep his mother's affair secret away from his father and just the rest of the family must have really been a stressful time for him.
It was interesting that the film was the weakest when it was not on his mother,
yeah.
when it was on him, and I didn't really care so much about his kind of high school problems, apart from the horrific anti-Semitism. That was probably the only thing of substance in that story.
Did you not really feel anything though when he had sort of put these like school film together, and then they had that really big confrontation, like his bully and the and Sammy himself, when they were just arguing about how the bully was sort of painted as this like hero. But
to me, it was, if that was real life, and it's quite extraordinary, because to me it felt like a pure fantasy of like a bully, someone being bullied, having a heart to heart with their bully, and I don't know, it just seemed like something out of Wattpad fiction, or it just seemed a bit more fictionalised, that bit, and it made me think of the whole film a bit differently, in that these are real life people he's talking about who did horrible things in their teenage years, and they should be called out on it, I believe, especially with the racism. I think it's an educational tool to show how far we have to come and how bad it used to be as well in America. But for me, it just felt a bit petty, almost some of the... And I think if someone with... I think he's inviting the viewer to think, with all the success Steven Spielberg's had in his life, are you still hung up about high school? I think in some ways a lot of us are still hung up about what happened in the past, and that's kind of the theme of the whole film with his mother. Yeah. He's still hung up on... I think the whole theme with the bullying as well in school was, as an artist, his view was art as the outsider. Yeah. And that as an artist you'll never quite fit in to normal society, and that is why you're compelled to produce that school film, which was very, very good, especially for someone who's 18. Yeah. But the motivation behind it is interesting, because it seemed it wasn't by jealousy or lust or rage. It was
sort of him showing the middle finger to his bully.
It was, but it was also him showing that he is an artist, and he will do the best film possible, even if it puts someone he dislikes in a flattering light. But absolutely. To me, it kind of it was saying, this is your glory days. This is the best you're ever gonna get it.
I guess in some ways it's like the work and film, or in any walks of life, the work that sort of launches you is always going to be, to you, I guess, the best piece of work. Right? Like, obviously Spielberg's gone on to like an amazing career, obviously, with all his nominations for film awards, but I guess in his eyes, like, the first piece of work that he did when he was very young is like still clearly resonates to him very, very well.
And you saw a lot with the scouting scenes in Arizona, that you see that in other films of his, you know, the emphasis on the child and recreation, and it's that Stranger Things kind of cycling around, which is based on E.T., which is his film. So he did kind of show exactly where all his influences lay, and cowboys and westerns. I think it's that type of film that, if it already sounds boring to you just hearing about it, I don't think you might like it. But if you do love film, and you're just interested in seeing a director's very kind of complex take on his mother, then it's for you.
I was sort of contemplating this after I watched it, like who would sort of enjoy this more, and I was sort of like, would the casual film viewer go to see this and enjoy it, or is this more for the purist? And I guess I was sort of in the middle. I think it does lean more towards the film purist, but I feel like a casual film goer would sort of enjoy this as well. But it's obviously just well acted and well shot, and just Spielberg.
It is very much a Christmas film.
Yeah, like
to see with your whole family in a cinema, and then kind of, I think you would be drawn into kind of this cozy, comforty feeling, which was what the advertisements portrayed.
Yeah.
And then for it to be a very kind of deep film really about childhood trauma and what constitutes childhood trauma, which is relative.
Yeah.
It is personal. So for him, but I think that's what the film was grappling with by the end is, was his childhood that bad? Was it that good?
I don't think, I see where you're coming from, yeah, but I think it's also just him wanting to say how, to show how he got into films and how and where his passions come from and how that was shaped by his family upbringing. I don't think he was sort of saying, look, my family trauma was bad, or my childhood was traumatizing. But I mean, I guess some parts of it were, but I think he was just sort of trying to say, look, this is how I got into the business. This is what shaped me. This is what inspires me.
Yeah. Thank you for watching the 21st Century Film Club. Goodbye for now.